Welcome to Tuesdays with Dr. Traci. Tuesdays with Dr. Traci. Tuesdays with Dr. Traci. See, I had to start and laugh from the beginning.
I feel like I should get up and dance.
Please join in. Join in, Dr. Beatty. Join in. I'm really excited today for our guest, Dr. Mario Beatty. Yes, he is in the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. You are an associate professor, right? Yes. And so we're going to learn more about Dr. Beatty today and about Egyptology. You all don't understand how excited I am because he goes deep. So I'm going to try not to sit up here like, I'm going to try to stay focused and ask the questions, and actually engage in the conversation because part of me is going to feel like taking notes. Okay, and or being like, oh wow, So I'm excited about that. But what I'm going to allow to happen is Dr. Beatty to tell us who he is. He's involved in so many different things. So I'm going to allow Dr. Beatty. And thank you for coming on today, Dr. Beatty. I'm so excited to have you. But if you can please tell our audience today who you are and what it is that you do. You do many things, so I'm going to leave that to you.
Well, this is the Cliff Notes version. Mario Beatty. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I have, I've been on a journey in terms of examining and studying the Africana experience for a very long time. And I have all of my degrees in Black Studies. I have my undergraduate degree from Miami University in Akron, Ohio, my master's degree from the Ohio State University, and then I got my doctoral degree at Temple University. And it was at Temple University where I actually became interested in this area in terms of African civilization and Egyptology. In terms of my career, I've taught in the Atlanta University Center at Morris Brown College, at Bowie State University, the Chair of African American Studies at Chicago State University. And then I made my way here to Howard University in 2011. And I've been here for a decade. That's my kind of academic hat. So I have a service hat. And I'm part of a lot of different organizations, as Dr. Wyatt has made mention of. But I would say the most prominent organization that I'm a part of is the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization. And that's the organization that I'm currently president of. And that organization has been around since 1984. And that organization is dedicated to the rescue, restoration, and reconstruction of African history and culture. And we've been at this for a long time, convening African scholars from around the world to discuss this topic in detail. I've been president, it seems like 50 years. seems like I'm doing the Sand Festival. And I've only been president for a little bit over 10 years, but it seems like much longer than that. But it's a labor of love. All of this is a labor of love when you're doing something that you're passionate about and doing something to uplift the consciousness of our people, of humanity, of the importance of this knowledge as a centering and grounding piece for the work that we do. So in a nutshell, that's who I am.
That's a lot. See, that's deep. And there's even more. This is just a sprinkle. See, I told you all are in for a treat. Yes, but that is great. Now, in hearing that, who were some of the people that you studied under? Who was those who were your mentors during your?
That's a great question. At Miami University, there were a number of scholars, but I'll cite two. Othello Harris, who was an expert on the Black athlete, actually. And he was in the sociology department, but he took me under his wing. And he was a relatively new faculty member when he got to Miami University. And the thing is that he saw talent. And when he saw talent, he wanted to nurture it. And so, you know, he kind of took me under his wing, took me to conferences, gave me an opportunity to present, you know, at conferences on the Black athlete. That type of experience for undergraduate students is invaluable when teachers show the confidence in you. It's almost like they can see things in you that you can't see in yourself. And it gives you more confidence in yourself and your abilities and capacities to do great work. In my undergraduate career, there was a scholar named Susan Mosley Howard, who was a psychologist, an African-American psychologist. She's now retired, but she was classmates with Naeem Akbar at the University of Michigan. And that experience transformed me because she taught a course in my senior year on African-American psychology, and she introduced me to African-centered psychologists. And as part of my senior year, her and there was another scholar that she team taught this course with, Yvette Harris, who actually is still at Miami University. They brought in Kobe Cambone, aka Joseph Baldwin. Kobe Cambone is one of the most prominent African-centered psychologists, did phenomenal work, constructed a phenomenal legacy at Florida A&M University in terms of this area, is renowned in the field with Dr. Myers, Dr. Nobles, Dawoodi Azibo. There are many of them now. But they brought in my senior year, they brought in Kobe Cambone to speak on African-centered psychology in front of just, you know, Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, it's lily white. Like when I came in as an undergraduate student, there was no more than 300 Black students. That was max, and mine was like the largest class. And to be in a room with Kobe Cambone talking about African-centered psychology in the most detailed, systematic way in front of this sea of whiteness, you know, and every question that they asked about it, he was just slaying. I mean, it was, I walked out of that room and I said, yep, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to be like that. So Cambone, he inspired me to do something. And what I did, I took that experience, and as I was graduating, because there was no more courses for me to take as an undergraduate student as I was graduating, so I was taking graduate courses. And my specialty was actually South African history. You know, so I was taking graduate courses in the area of South African history. So I know a lot about South African history. I did work. I was very passionate about John Dubé and the beginnings of the ANC. And so I was doing work on that. But the psychology piece in the summer, as I was graduating, I did this massive study of major African-centered psychologists. And I wrote, in the summer, I wrote 10-page papers on each one of them individually and their work. I wrote a 10-page paper on Molefi Asante, on Malana Karinga, on Naeem Akbar, on Linda James Myers, Kobe Cambone. When I got out of my undergraduate career and went into Ohio State, I'm ready.
Yes.
You know, I'm ready. You know, and I went to Ohio State to study with Linda James Myers, who was an African-centered psychologist there. And to this day, you know, Linda James Myers is one of my closest advisors and kind of mentors and guides. I still talk to her to this day. So she has been very influential in terms of my development at Ohio State. Nick Nelson, at Ohio State, Nick Nelson was, a giant in the field of Black studies in terms of political science. I was certainly influenced by him there. OK Onyejekway in terms of African politics. But then I shifted to Temple University. And when I came to Temple University, I came there thinking that I was going to study with Daoudi Azibo, was another African-centered psychologist. But as I was entering Temple, he was leaving. And I felt depleted. I said, all right, what am I going to do? And I was passionate about psychology, and basically the person that I wanted to work with is leaving. And I was passionate about Marcus Garvey. I had done a lot of work on Garvey in terms of the UNIA. Still am passionate about Pan-Africanism, still very politically astute and focused and knowledgeable of things that are going on in the African world. So I don't just study the past, I'm very versed on what's going on. But, in addition to that, I was passionate about the Reconstruction period too, in U.S. history and in terms of African Americans and their role. And when it came time to do my dissertation, my second year at Temple University, a scholar came there by the name of Theophile Obenga. And Theophile Obenga is a close confidant of Sheikh Anta Diop, who is a master in this area. Theophile Obenga is a master of linguistics, of African philosophy, culture. He's from Congo, Brazzaville. But Obenga came and taught Egyptian hieroglyphs, Meta Neter. That was why he was brought to Temple University to teach that course. And outside of, kind of my being a part of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, that's just kind of a passing thing. Like that was the extent of my interest in terms of ancient Egypt. You got the pyramids on the Sphinx, pyramids on your shirt. That was the extent of my interest. I wasn't, I had no plan to actually do this for my life's work. And so Obenga, but when someone like that comes into a space, and my close colleague, Greg Carr and I were classmates, and it's like everyone, well, the top students knew, like when someone like Theophile Obenga comes into your midst, you can't miss that moment. Like even if it's not your area of study, you must sit in that course to just breathe the air, yes, of that type of scholar, to be in their presence, to just say that you took them, to just kind of learn something of their method and approach, of their approach to knowledge. Because you're going to learn something, even though the topic or the substance or the content may not be necessarily what you actually want to do, So I sat in his course in Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Obenga began to see something in me. And, I was handing in assignments. I have every assignment from him, from all of those years. Wow. And, it was A+, 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 A+. And Obenga was like, you need to go on with this. Like, you need to do your dissertation in this area. You need to study this seriously, deeply. And I was resistant, resistant because I'm like, okay, this is a sea change. I didn't really want to do this. I know this is something that I'm good at. I can draw glyphs very well. These assignments, it looks beautiful. But I had made a research trip to University of Michigan, where everybody's dissertation is housed. And I had decided at that point that I was going to do my dissertation on Blacks and Reconstruction. And I had just gathered like hundreds of articles, like hundreds.
Wow.
And brought them all back,
Mm-hmm.
Sitting in, sitting in my apartment. And I remember Obenga telling me that, oh, Mario, this house, he said, Garvey, he would say, oh, Garvey, we know this, Reconstruction, we know these things. You must do Medunech. You must do this. And I said, Dr. Bing, like, because I'm thinking also about like kind of my career too, trying to project out, like, does this really translate to a professional world? Like, in the back of your mind, you're kind of thinking, am I going to be able to kind of get a job, in this area with this type of expertise in terms of my background? And Obenga's philosophy was that, he would just say, Mario, don't worry about money. Worry about being excellent. And everything else is going to take care of itself. And I just remember one night, I have the paper at home. I actually get emotional just in talking about it.
Yes.
Because Obenga literally, one night, Obenga is teaching Meta Nature, but then he's also a student taking classes at Temple. He was taking astronomy classes at Temple University.
Wow.
Because he wanted to learn more. And in this astronomy class, he had begun to read ancient Egyptian spiritual texts in a different way, in a more systematic way, focusing on astronomy that he didn't quite see before.
Wow.
And he wanted me to carry the baton of that study. And I said, okay, so now you want me now you want me to come out of my whole comfort zone to not only do Meta Nature, but also now to become an expert, in astronomy, in these spiritual texts, and then put it all together in a dissertation. And one night, Obenga, he sits down with a piece of paper and he outlines my whole dissertation. He says, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this, you will do this, you will talk about this. Conclusion. Go do it. And I yielded. I said, okay, all right, I yielded. And once I yielded, it was a sense of freedom. And then, with, people that know me, and absolutely know, Greg Carr also, is that once we set our mind to something, nobody is going to outwork us. That's for sure.
Yes.
Like, you're not going to outwork us in our area. And we are going to, what I did after that, I constructed my committee. I went to Chicago. I added Jacob Carruthers, who was another one of my phenomenal teachers and guides in Chicago. I went out to Chicago and I stayed with him. And I made trips to the University of Chicago and the Oriental Institute. And over a 2-week period, I probably copied off at least 200 books and articles on ancient Egyptian spiritual texts and astronomy. Everything. Wow. And had it shipped back.
Was that much? Wow.
It had it all shipped back to Philadelphia. And then I began to construct, my dissertation, which is on the image of celestial phenomena in the book of Coming Forth by Day. Obenga gave me phenomenal training because I would be his gopher.
Mhm.
He would take trips to the University of Pennsylvania, the Museum of Anthropology and Archaeology, to work, to copy his books off. And I copied off a lot of stuff there, but I didn't have a lot of stuff that Chicago had.
Mhm.
But, you know, even there, you know, I'm sitting there copying all of these books and articles for Obenga, getting headaches in the process because I don't know what I'm looking at.
Right.
He's describing to me, we would go down the aisles. And as we go down the aisles, he would pull this book off and he would say, "Oh, this is Lanzoni. Oh, it's Italian. Oh, you must have this text. You know, oh, you must copy this. Oh, yes, this is," you know, he would go like each individual book, he would explain the scholar, he would explain the importance, and then he would tell me to go copy it. You go copy this. I'm like, my head is starting like, I don't know, Lanzoni, I don't know all these people. Like, who are these people? You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, and over time, you know, and Obenga can go all day, just like Greg. He's like, when do they sleep?
Right. Mhm.
And it's building a muscle, you know, it's building a kind of an energy and stamina.
Yeah.
And that taught me now, like at some point in his absence, when he's not there, then I love to do that.
Right.
And I could go into any library and copy off things for hours and hours and hours.
Mhm.
Know what I'm looking at, know their value, know their importance. And working with Obenga, you know, for those few years, ultimately that's the major influence. And Obenga changed the whole trajectory of my life and my career. I can absolutely say that because without that intervention at that moment, you wouldn't see me here talking about African civilization. You wouldn't see me at Howard University teaching meta nature, which he taught in a phenomenal technical way that, you know, I attempt to impart to my students. You would see none of that, you know. So it is, you know, by the grace of the Creator that I was able to be at a specific moment, at a specific place and time in order to take advantage of just that type of blessing, you know. And I'm forever grateful, you know, to Obenga. And that's why Obenga, he told me when I left Temple University, he said, "Mario, you must spread this to all African Americans. You must teach what I've taught you." And I've taken it as a duty, as a responsibility to do that. And when I got to Atlanta, my first job, Morris Brown College, it wasn't even on part of my course load. You know, I taught meta nature to the community in the evenings for free for anyone in the Atlanta University Center that wanted to come and take it. Wow. Just because he told me that's what I had to do. You know, and over time, you know, I'm not the same person that I was then. I'm much stronger now. Yeah. Like in terms of my mastery of meta nature, it's almost effortless for me now. Like it's, and then at that point, I was still struggling. You know, there were many things that I didn't know, but I had the courage to teach, you know, and the courage to know, and the courage to learn, you know, and that's something, you know, that we have to also, this is the psychology side of just being engaged in growth and in knowledge. Is that you're not going to always get it right, you know, but that can't impede you and block you from your own growth and development. You know, you have to embrace it all, because even in the setbacks, you know, even in the tension, even in all of the things that you're trying to do to intellectually grow and develop, you know, all of those setbacks, if you go through them in the right way with the right frame of mind and perspective, on the other side of that storm is going to be beauty. You know, On the other side of that storm is going to be the sun. You know, it's going to be light. You know, and so you just have to go through the process. You know, the knowledge process is difficult. And just like anything in life that's of value, you have to put something in it. You have to put your all into things that you want to master. And it's painful, you know, but on the other side of that pain is glory, you know. And so I, you know, in my life, I don't take learning for granted. I don't take teaching for granted. I don't take what so many teachers have given me for granted. And that's why, you know, at Howard University and really, you know, all of the students and the platforms that I teach on now, like I'm trying to give this to our community. Everything that has been deposited in me, I'm giving it away. And when I leave this earth, you know, and be among the ancestors, like I don't want to leave anything on this field. Everything that is in me of value, that could be of value to lifting up our community and African people, I want to make sure that everyone has a roadmap to get this information if they want it.
Now, see, this is deep. Now, all I can say is amen. He is preached, okay? If you weren't inspired and encouraged by that, I don't know what to say, okay? But, I mean, and please, you all, when he's calling out these names, Dr. Theophile Obinga, please go look him up. And then you're going to understand. You're going to understand why this is so important. Okay, Dr. Jacob Carruthers, you're going to understand all the names he's listed, all the names he's mentioned. I hope you're taking notes so you'll understand why he's so powerful. Traveling to Egypt with him now 3 times, he and Dr. Carr, like I said, they are both very hard workers. Whatever area it is that they're studying, they're going to know it to its most intricate parts. And so they are both great scholars, right? But when you travel with them to Egypt, Dr. Beatty will walk into different sites and Dr. Beatty just starts reading hieroglyphs. And he's just so, you know, like, yeah, and that says da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And you're like, oh, wow. Now, to me, and most people, you just see shapes and them. It's like, yeah, okay, this is beautiful. We're looking at the colors, the shapes, like, oh, this is amazing. It has been preserved. It's kept. It's glorious. It's grand. Just like, whoa, look at the opulence. And we like, oh, we can just imagine. And Dr. Beatty's like, yeah. And then out of nowhere, he'll stop and break it down. And then he's talking about the philosophical and the spiritual. And then he'll bring that in and you'll be like, so the moon, the stars, and the pyramid, and how these things are like, you'll be like, oh my God, I gotta process all of this, you know, and that's just how it is. So traveling with him to Egypt, like I said, 3 times, he is absolutely right. He is that scholar. Let me just tell you, he is a major Egyptologist when it comes to meta-nature, understanding that and what that means. And so that you all are not totally lost on some of these concepts if you're not familiar, because he, as you can see, is a teacher at heart. This is what he does, and this is the community. So when people hear you mention Egyptology,
yes,
you know, what does that mean? So when they say, you know, okay,
sure.
he Egyptology, like, yeah, okay, so what does that mean actually? So
well, that's a great question, Dr. Wyatt. I will say this: it's a long answer to this question of what it means, and then what it means for us as African people.
Yes.
But I would say that broadly, Egyptology is about the study of ancient Egypt. But this is the rub, is that before Champollion's kind of discovery in 1822, like Champollion used the Rosetta Stone, which is the first object that you see when you go into the British Museum. Jean-Francois Champollion, who is a French kind of savant, was credited, by mostly everyone with giving us kind of a different type of key to unlock the door to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, it's not, decipherment is an ongoing process. It's not like it's a completed process. But before that frame, before that key, but Champollion died young, so he couldn't actually even continue his discoveries. That was continued by German scholars into the 19th century. But before that, there were these competing frames used to understand ancient Egypt that were basically relatively stable before Champollion's effort. The frame of Greco-Roman writers. So this would be using scholars like Herodotus or Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BC, or Plutarch in the 1st century AD, any number of kind of Greco-Roman writers. And then you're looking at, you know, their texts and what they had to say about their experiences with Egypt in the late period. And then you're kind of using that as a grounding for understanding ancient Egypt. In terms of the language, what's going on in terms of these Greco-Roman writers is that in late antiquity, they what we see in like the temples, the late period temples, is a type of hieroglyphs that is referred to as Ptolemaic hieroglyphs. And this is a type of hieroglyphs, like it's the same, but it's a different system from the one I teach. That means that the hieroglyphs have taken on a more kind of symbolic quality in the late period, is that you do have to understand them, you know, as these kind of individual containers, although they have sounds attributed to them also. But, you know, it does have this more symbolic aspect. And when you read Greco-Roman writers, that's the aspect when they're looking at these monuments, that's what they're commenting on. That's the, you know, that frame is picked up in the modern period by entities like Freemasonry, you know, in terms of the more esoteric readings also, and layering that, you know, also in terms of these more institutional formations. So these are different frames to understand ancient Egypt. And in addition to, of course, the biblical frame, you know, in terms of ancient Egypt, with Noah, with Ham, etc., and Cush, all of these, Misraim. So these types of approaches, before we see Champollion, these were the approaches that were on the landscape and kind of competing. Champollion kind of disrupts these frames because now there is the possibility for a different grounding for the study of ancient Egypt that is now grounded not in using Greco-Roman texts as a primary source, not using Freemasonry as a primary source, you know, not using the Bible as a primary source, but actually using hieroglyphs, what we see on the monuments, as the primary source to study ancient Egypt in terms of its own language, on its own terms, from its own frame of reference. So it opens up the playbook in terms, there are really two disciplines that are pillars of Egyptology: language and archaeology. These are the two things. That is, finding things and then trying to read, you know, what's on these monuments, what's in these tombs, you know, what's on that sarcophagi, you know, etc. Trying to read them. These are the two things. But in this context, there is a contestation, especially like in the United States and other parts of the diaspora. There is a contestation also. And that means that the study of antiquity of ancient Egypt is also weaved into the history and politics and the society of the present moment. And that means everyone is looking to some type of lens in antiquity, some departure point, some reference point in antiquity as kind of a roadmap for the present. Everyone is looking at this, you know? And so in terms of what happens with Black folk, of course, you have Prince Hall, you have many people, David Walker, Hosea Easton, Martin Delaney, all of these people in our genealogy in the US who begin to use Ethiopia and Egypt as this twin grounding to understand their own humanity,
Mm-hmm.
as a departure point, you know. And there are white scholars that attempt to demonstrate and prove that African people have never had any history,
Mm-hmm.
that African people, based upon the Bible, are cursed and damned, that African people have invented nothing, that African people are empty culturally,
Yes.
empty in terms of civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So because African people are empty, it's the idea that now we're on a civilizing mission. So now we're your masters. Now we give you what it is that you need. And of course, we're your masters literally, like you're enslaved on our plantations in the United States. And they're using the past, they're creating rationales that are handmaidens to the project of oppression and slavery. And they don't want African people to have any reference point in the past that bolsters a humanity, and so when you see all of these African scholars who are doing this, who are using Ethiopian Egypt in this way in the United States, is that they're actually synchronizing all of this stuff together. Freemasonry, the Bible, Greco-Roman writers, they're even, Champollion's discovery, they're mixing it all together. But at the center of it is trying to create a departure point for the discussion of African people's humanity in time and space. That's at the center of it. And so if we fast forward this conversation, we've been at this for a long time, and we can add other civilizations to this in terms of Africa too, because it's not that Ethiopia and Egypt are the only ones. It's just that they're the oldest, that we can see, and with written records and things like that. And Kush is in there also. So it's like they become useful reference points to start the discussion, not to end it, to start the discussion. But if we fast forward today, I was at a conference. I spoke at a Sheikh Anta Diop symposium on his 100th birthday in December of this year. And there was a conversation around Egyptology. And there is a new book. Like I always want to give sources. Okay. There's a book out by two scholars, Aidan Dotson and Salima Ikram. Salima Ikram is an Egyptian Egyptologist. And they have a book out called, it's very expensive, but they have a book out called History of World Egyptology. But their conception of Egyptology is a gloss on the more institutional national formations of the field that they feel that are quote unquote legitimate. These are the academic spaces, the institutional spaces, the things that they feel like they have vetted, and that they see are reputable. These are things that they have verified, etc. And these are the things that we're going to talk about, So in that conversation, in their history of world Egyptology, you already know where African people are at, or where African scholars and scholarship is at. You already know that we're invisible in that narrative, of Egyptology, of kind of the standard field. There was a scholar, a German scholar that spoke at the Diop conference named Christian Langer. And I actually have a piece that's coming out in his book this year. And he's trying to create an antidote to what Aidan Dotson and Salima Ikram did in their book. And he calls his book Global Egyptology. And what he's trying to do in his book, this book is going to be published in London, but what he tried to do in his book is to essentially say that there are a multiplicity of approaches and perspectives on ancient Egypt all across the world. And we should try to understand all of them and what they bring to the table. Now, for me, I don't care. Like, I'm not, like, when I write this article, when I wrote that article for the book, it's like, this is who we are as African people in the diaspora. This is our read on who these Black people were in the Nile Valley. And you can take it or let it alone. But you can, this is who we are. But in that approach, in this global Egyptology approach, in his comments, he said something that was very disturbing to me, not coming from him. He said in his speech, he said that, many of my colleagues that I've talked to, they have said, they have told me that they just can't, that they're reluctant to embrace this, this African scholarship and African scholars in the field of Egyptology, because their work is not really strong, their work is not really well, sourced, they're really not strong in terms of meta-nature and things like that. So we can't really, we can't legitimize that, and we can't engage in that. So there's a reluctance to really approach them and let them in, so to speak. And I said this on the Nubia platform that I teach on, that I teach meta-nature on, and the platform that I'm teaching meta-nature on, I guarantee you, I'm telling you right now, folks, is that what I'm teaching in terms of meta-nature on that platform, nobody in this world, no one has that type of course that I'm teaching on Nubia. Yes. Just compare. But I said, you're not a gatekeeper. You don't get to say who comes in and comes out, who studies and who doesn't study ancient Egypt. You don't get to set the criteria for who studies this. There's no gate to keep. And in fact, we're not listening to you. That is the point. Like, we're not listening to you. We don't actually care what you do. Like, we can read your work, but there is another school. There is an African school of Egyptology. And this is my major point in terms of this discussion and answering this question, is that there is an African school of Egyptology that is very deep, that is very vast, that is all over the continent of Africa, that can be found in Senegal. They have a whole center run out of the history department in Senegal in terms of Egyptology with some of the finest scholars. Babacar Sall, Abu Bakr Musalam, Mohammed Nisir Sar, Malik Dim. They're all there. They're doing phenomenal work. Ivory Coast, Kenya, with Yoporeka Somé, like Yves Ngono in southern Senegal, in Cameroon, with Alexis Takei. All over the continent, you find these scholars. In the diaspora, in Guadeloupe, in Trinidad, etc. In addition to the vibrancy of what we have here in the United States. And all of this is inspired by a different view that Egyptology can't contain, and they can't approach it in the way that we approach it because they don't have the expertise and the sensibility. And ancient Egypt and Kemet should be approached for what it is. And that is an African civilization through and through. And our question as African people is, how do we do that? And we're not asking, we're not begging, we're not pleading with any European Egyptologist to answer that question for us. We are doing our work ourselves on our own terms, in our own way, and it's excellent. And it's excellent. So, regardless of what they think, and what they say about what we do, Obinga would always say this to me. I'd say, Mario, he'd say, they do their business, we do our business.
Mm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, it's fine. You do what you do, and we're going to do what we do. And you're not going to stop what we do. That is the whole point of this. And when we begin to discuss like the impact that this frame is having on our young people,
yeah.
on scholars, like at Howard University, when I teach Egyptian hieroglyphs, if I put a cap of 60 to 70 students, I would have 60 to 70 students in my class. Mm. My cap is 45, and I have 45 every semester. It is what there is a fascination globally, but there is a fascination, among African people with learning about this past. Mm-hmm. And it is very unique, to have this type of knowledge in spaces that we control. Mm-hmm. Yes. Like the teaching of meta nature at HBCUs, there's only two places. It's at Howard and it's at Clark Atlanta University with Thomas Scott in divinity. And so that's it. But there are not a lot of places to study this. But we're opening the playbook up to study it. And we're opening this knowledge up to our whole community and platforms like Nubia, and giving our whole community the opportunity to learn this and to be a part of the conversation, because for, Greg and I, this knowledge shouldn't be contained within the elitist walls of the academy. Mm-hmm. We got to give this knowledge to everybody, to level the playing field. And everybody out there, we don't even know where the next Sheikh Anta Diop is coming from, mm-hmm. Where the mm-hmm. next Imhotep is coming from, where the next Hatshepsut is coming from. Like, we don't know where they're coming from, mm-hmm. but we know they're coming. Yes. We know they're coming, and all we want to do is to try to plant the seeds in the soil so that all of these plants, wherever they're at, can grow and develop and be nourished by this knowledge.
Absolutely. Now, see, I told you all to put your seatbelts on and get ready, because this was going to be a lesson. You were going to learn something today. And I know we have a question as well. So I'm going to turn to answer the question from there. But also, Dr. Beatty is mentioning narrative in Nubia. If you're interested in that community, if you're familiar with Karen Hunter and Sirius XM, and she's a great journalist, podcast, TV host, radio show host. Okay, she is phenomenal, but she has created this platform with Dr. Greg Carr, Dr. Beatty, and many other scholars and different people from the community where they focus on various issues. And so Dr. Beatty has also joined that community. But if you're interested, you can look it up. It's narrative, but with a K in front of it. Correct. And Nubia with a K in front of it, okay? The K is silent. On both, but you can definitely look that up and you can join their community there. They even have, I believe, like their own little social media platform within that. Yes. There's different classes you can sign up and take, and everything, and it's for the community, and it's for a very, very low price. There is a low cost to this, but it is low. Based on what you're getting and have access to, it is absolutely low. So
look, Greg, we've taught a PhD program on this platform.
Yeah.
Students would pay, well over $100,000 to get what we're giving.
See, to the community.
For sure.
And that's so beautiful. So you all make sure you connect and support them. You can actually, if you go to at Africana Car on Twitter or X now, you can follow him, and usually he's retweeting or tweeting, the episodes that he does within Class with Carr, which is also a part of that. But then you can also see how to connect to narrative, because that's part of the tree on there, I think, where you can connect to that. So you all make sure you support and check it out if you're interested. And I already know you're interested, okay? Because I can feel it. But for the one question, we have a question over there, Michaela.
From Crown Elm, are there any conferences on the African perspective / academia on Egyptology?
Of course. There. Okay. Of course. There's one coming up for ASCAC. So the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilization, we actually have our national conference coming up it's going to be April, what are our dates? I think it's April 19th through the 27th. It's a whole week. It's going to be virtual, but you don't want to miss the conference this year. Why? Because what we're doing this year is that we're trying to, what we've been doing this for the past few years, but this year in particular, is that we're bringing the spirit of what I saw in the Sheikh Anta Diop symposium that I presented at in December. We're bringing that energy to our conference. So we have presenters. We've got like 5 presenters from Senegal, okay, presenting at this conference. We got 2 from Kenya, presenting at this conference. We got 1 from Ghana, wow. Actually, no, 2. Actually, 2 people from Ghana presenting it. This is truly a Pan-African conference. And you are going to see at this conference the best scholarship in this area taking place on the African continent at the University of Sheikh Anta Diop in particular. This is we've been doing this for a long time in ASCAC, but this is going to be a phenomenal conference. So yes, there are many conferences like that that are constantly occurring. And actually we have regional conferences too in ASCAC. We have different regions. And by all means, please feel free to join our organization too. But there is a great deal of energy. And I try to keep up with this energy all over the globe in terms of African people. There are a lot of formations. There's the Kepra Association in Paris, France, that is doing phenomenal work. In Guadeloupe, there is Ani Yart, that's spelled Anyjart, that is doing phenomenal work in Guadeloupe in terms of this area. This phenomenal platform in terms of education, in terms of Kemet. So there is a lot of different entities around the world in terms of African people engaged in this type of knowledge. And what we're trying to do in ASCAC is to try to bring all of this together in this great Pan-African conversation.
That's going to be amazing. I'm going to check that out myself. See if I can be a part of that this year.
Absolutely.
Yes. So you also, that's ASCAC, and that's ASCAC.com, right? Or .org. ASCAC.org. And before we close out, I don't know, Dr. Beatty, I know, because see, I know this is going to be deep. So, but maybe give them just a little sprinkle. If we were to think, I know, when we see the pyramids, we like opulence is great, it's big, yes. It's beautiful, especially when we think of the 3 of Giza. So you see these big edifices and you're like, oh my God, but it's so much behind that. We can't go into that. I just want to give you all just a taste of this. Then you're going to have to go and either register for classes at Howard University, okay? Or you're going to have to go through Nubia or Narrative to be able to get access to some of this teaching. But in that, what is the spiritual significance behind the pyramid? And that would be my closing question.
Woo! I would say, Dr. Wyatt, when we look at the pyramids, or if we start with, if we got to start with the step pyramid of Djoser or Netcher or Het, that is divine one of body, constructed. The architect is great Imhotep in the 3rd dynasty. But that's a phenomenal structure. But you're asking me, like, what's the spiritual significance, but also like how to interpret the meaning. Like, this is not, even when we see like Kemet, the thing that I want you to take away with in terms of the construction is that this is not the first time that African people have constructed things that are intentionally in alignment with the heavens. You know, this type of understanding goes back a very long time, and we can see it in a lot of monumental settings in the Nile Valley. Most notably, of course, because my area is like astronomy, I am fascinated, although I haven't done a lot of work after my dissertation, but I keep up with the scholarship. I do keep up with the scholarship in this area. And when you look at locales like Nata Playa, which is, kind of west of Abu Simbel, 100 kilometers or so, where is this fascinating megalithic alignments, this like calendar circle of these Africans dated between 4,500 and 3,500 BC. This is way before Kemet has its formal founding. And what you see in this space is phenomenal, because you begin to see these Africans orienting, basically creating a calendar, understanding these cycles, understanding time, understanding these cosmic cycles, understanding like certain stars, understanding certain constellations, certain stars like Sirius, especially, which Kemites would call Sopadet, certain major constellations like Orion, which they call Sa, which follows, Sirius. They begin to, and of course the sun, also. But when we reach the beginning of what we know of as Kemet, when they come together, these understandings that precede them, like that are just from these Africans in the Nile Valley, we basically have the civil calendar. We have the civil calendar basically in full, from the oldest period. And what you have to know is that this civil calendar is our calendar. This 365 days, calendar, that's our calendar, with minor reforms in the first century BC by Julian. But outside of that is that these pyramids, when you look at the step pyramid, and you're looking at, to me, this one of the most, it's the most phenomenal place for me to be in, is the step pyramid, because in terms of the grandeur that you're referring to, in terms of the scale, building to this orientation, I think that impetus to build to scale like this, in terms of that grandeur, I think it starts there. It starts with Imhotep. It starts in that particular era, and then it continues. And there's so many, the stone walls, the Corvetto cornice, the platforms, the shrines, the chapels, the statues, the grand maze of just underground tunnels in that monument. How that monument is oriented, the said festival courts, the platforms, the reed columns, everything in there, it kind of sets an architectural standard, an art standard for forms that will continue to see repeated over and over again. So when we talk about a pyramid, it's not just that we're talking about an edifice, we're also talking about what's around the edifice in terms of the complex. I'll just answer, and I think we're running short on time, but I'm going to answer this very simply. And I'll use the Pyramid of Khufu to kind of answer this question. The Great Pyramid, what everyone calls the Great Pyramid of Khufu. What is that pyramid's name? That pyramid's name is Akhet Khufu. Every pyramid has a name. Okay? Everyone has a name. That name is Akhet Khufu, which means that pyramid's name is the horizon of Khufu. But it's more than that, because Akhet is this, if you're familiar with it, it's this liminal space. It's this liminal space that is a space of emergence, a space of becoming. It is a space that talks about creation, You know, like in this cosmology, what you see in this form is speaking on multiple levels. It's speaking on creation that's emerging, this kind of primeval mound that's emerging from the primeval waters of noon. But it's also talking about the emerging of all celestial phenomena as part of these cosmic cycles. You know, that means that at one time, when you're in pyramid spaces, it is speaking to both stellar and solar cycles. That's why I think it's a fundamental mistake, like with interpretations like Robert Bauval, who attempts to kind of situate the pyramids as this representation of just the belt of Orion. I think it was a mistake to do that. And although there's a lot of debate in terms of the meaning of the pyramids, the spiritual significance, but for me, Dr. Wyatt, when I see there, when you look at the name like Akhet Khufu, to me, the pyramids are a representation of the totality of the cosmic cycle and rebirth of all of this celestial phenomena. They're not making a separation. And it doesn't, and it shouldn't be like one thing that you're looking for. Like you shouldn't just be looking for, oh, that's the Star of Orion. How do I know this? Well, we could look at the pyramid texts that we see, like when we see the monuments in terms of Khufu, we can go back behind that a little bit, and we can go to the end of the 15th dynasty, and we can look at the Pyramid of Unas in the late 5th dynasty, where the pyramid text, that means that these are texts that are written inside the pyramids. And we get a glimpse of the cosmology that rulers attached to the construction of these pyramids. Now, some Egyptologists will say, well, you can't backmap that to the past. Well, bruh, it's only like 150. Like, you're like, it's got to be, somewhat similar. Like, even though, Osiris might not literally be there, but the ideas are similar in terms of rebirth. And what you see all throughout those texts is you see Sirius, you see Orion, you see, the sun, you see all of the stars, you see all of these cycles, these cosmic cycles of rebirth. And you see them attempting to try to get to a very rich region of the sky, which is the imperishable stars, the Ikimusek. This is the imperishable stars are the stars that never dip below the horizon. They never die, and like those stars that never die, rulers wanted to live for eternity. So, but you see them trying to unite themselves with this whole cosmic cycle. So for me, when I see the spiritual significance of the pyramids, I'm looking at it holistically on a cosmic level. And to me, it encompasses all of it, not just one thing.
Whew. I told you. All I can say is that I told you. If this was church, I would say amen. The doors of the church are open. That's what I get. I would definitely say that it's time to pass the plate, because that's just how amazing this has been.
Make checks
Thank
and
you.
make all donations payable to Mario Beatty, P.O. Box.
Yeah, you heard that, right? You got that? So you got the message. No, this has been a great conversation,
Absolutely.
Dr. Beatty.
Dr.
Thank you so much on taking us on this journey into Egyptology. I wanted them to have a taste of what that was at the end, so you all could see the academic side, the side you could apply, but then also the spiritual and cosmic aspects of that and how deep this thing goes. But I wanted you all to see how deep he goes, and it still is just the surface. That's why I'm saying you're gonna make sure you're gonna have to connect to make sure that you can hear Dr. Beatty do his thing when it comes to Egyptology. So I know that Dr. Obinga, Dr. Harrison, I know they have to be extremely proud. Okay, because you are definitely carrying out the mission, and you are taking this to the community, to the world, to our people, and you've become that international scholar. I am grateful. I'm
grateful to you, Dr. Wyatt.
Yeah, I love Dr. Beatty, and his beautiful wife. They have been amazing to me. They are family. Absolutely. And hello, Queen Amber, if you're watching. That's his niece and sister. So I know she had liked it on Instagram, but if you're watching, Much love to you and Rashid, most definitely. But no, I thank you so much, Dr. Beatty, and for taking time out of your busy schedule to come and sit with us today and share so much knowledge and wisdom and inspiration with our community. And we love and appreciate you so much. And we wish you God's best. And I can't wait to hook up to hear some more of this good stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
And you all them notes you have, books, everything. He's left you with so much. And again, this is just a sprinkle on the cupcake because I've heard him go way deeper. Okay, so thank you all for your time. Thank you for joining us on Tuesdays with Dr. Traci, and we'll see you next time. Much love. Okay.